honored and delighted to introduce to you Ambassador Jacques Pitteloud of Switzerland. Ambassador Pitteloud has had a stellar and fascinating career, so varied that it was hard to summarize. As a Swiss diplomat, he served in Saudi Arabia, later as Swiss ambassador to Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Somalia, and the Seychelles, and since 2019 as ambassador to the United States. He also was in charge of a series of mediations in Central Africa. That was the diplomat. As an intelligence officer, he served in the Swiss Strategic Intelligence Service, later coordinated intelligence efforts for the Swiss government, and directed security policy and intelligence in the Swiss Ministry of Foreign Affairs. As a financial administrator, he was director of the Swiss agency responsible for development assistance to countries in what we used to call the Third World. And he had multiple other responsibilities in that agency in addition to being Director General. As an able-bodied Swiss male, he served in the Swiss Army, then acted as personal advisor to two successive Swiss defense ministers, and later chaired a study group to develop the future structures of the Swiss armed forces. As a concerned human being who witnessed the Rwanda Genocide, he created an organization to pursue the perpetrators. In his spare time, he loves to photograph birds and has published articles and books in that area. He also loves to spend time with his wife and daughter. As you listen to him speak, you will discover that he has an encyclopedic knowledge of a bewildering variety of other topics, which enlighten all that he does and says. Please give a warm Rotary welcome to Ambassador Jacques Pitteloud of Switzerland.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for this very, very kind introduction. Just short introduction, my name is Jacques Pitteloud. I've been the ambassador to the United States of America, the ambassador of Switzerland for the past, since September 2019. And I know they say Washington is never dull, but these 4 years have been indeed, to say the least, fairly interesting. What a ride it has been. I've been honored to represent my country, Switzerland, in our sister republic, the United States of America. I'm proud to highlight, I'm not going to bore you with numbers, but I'm proud to highlight that Switzerland is the 7th biggest foreign investor in the American economy. We are speaking something like $300 billion in the last 10 years. But we are also in research and development. We are the 3rd biggest foreign investor in the US. We have 2 small competitors, Japan and Germany, but you know, don't mention them. Don't mention them. And so, but this time, I have to say that in these 4 years, I have really had a hands-on and very intensive introduction into American politics. COVID-19, George Floyd, presidential election, January the 6th, the Russian aggression against the Ukraine, the midterm election, I could go on. It was not really boring. And sometimes I fool myself into believing that I do understand this country a little bit better than I did back in 2019. Of course, I had been in the US many, many times before coming as an ambassador. And actually, I first visited in 1976 when Jimmy Carter was running for president. Can you imagine? And so it gives you an idea of how old I am. I've always been fascinated by American history, and this is a country of great bookshops and inexhaustible historical research. If there are any Gen Z in the room, just you know, I'm alluding to this old-fashioned technology where you cut trees, you grind them into a pulp, you print things on them. We call them books. And usually there are more than 140 characters than on the book, but we boomers call these things books. But today I want to speak about America. And I know I'm violating one of the basic tenets of traditional diplomacy, which is never to speak in public about the country, about your host country, and to keep your assessments for yourself or for your government. But okay, I hope that you will allow me to share sorry, to share a few insights, observations, and points for consideration, both as an ambassador as well as an outsider and a human being. The United States of America is a great country. Actually, it's an exceptional country. And I would like to take a look with you at what is the real foundation of American exceptionalism. This country of yours is not great only on account of its sheer geographical size, military might, wealth, or technological prowess. Size does matter, of course, but after all, you are only less than 5% of the world's population. There are, however, a few elements that do indeed make the US into a country like no other. And let me name but a few. It starts, and how could it be different, with your Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, and so on and so on. And that among the rights that we hold being inalienable rights are the liberty and pursuit of happiness. And let's explore a little bit this very concept of pursuit of happiness. The founding fathers were wise enough to promise not the right to happiness, but the right to the pursuit of happiness. And this special formulation finds its roots in the deep-seated belief that this is a place where anyone should be offered the opportunity to pursue their dreams. It is true that the original blueprint kind of excluded both women and people of color from partaking in the hope, but it was just a matter of time until the vision of the Constitution could fulfill all its promises. It took people like Frederick Douglass, Abraham Lincoln, John Marshall Harlan, Susan B. Anthony, and Martin Luther King to extend the original promise to all human beings living in this country. But the ideals of both the Declaration of Independence and of the Constitution were nonetheless bound to lead to the society you live in today, we live in today, with the inevitability of DNA conditioning the maturing of any living being, which, by the way, was what Justice Harlan said and never stopped saying during the second half of the 19th century during his tenure at the Supreme Court. So for almost 250 years, the American dream has been working, imperfectly so, with bouts of fever, of course, with some dark episodes no one should be proud of. But after all, even this nation under God is but a human experiment and thus fallible and imperfect. It helps sometimes to be a foreigner visiting this country with fresh eyes, to realize something which will probably shock most people in this room. The American dream is still alive and kicking. I could tell you so many stories of people I met during those 4 years, from the Somali taxi driver in Texas to the Nigerian businessman in Maryland, the Bulgarian logistics specialist that was in Arizona, the US Marine officer from El Salvador, the Haitian banker in Chicago, the Pakistani self-made millionaire in North Carolina, or the Swiss scientist at NASA. What these people have in common is their love and gratitude to the United States of America. Immigrant communities from all over the world thrive across the country, thus belying the end of the American dream mantra that you hear so much about. Whilst doomsday sayers never tire of speaking about what a horrible country this is and how ashamed they are of a nation that, by the way, gives them the freedom and the economic security to criticize it from the safety of richly endowed universities, the rest of the world knows better. I have lived on quite a few continents. I've seen quite a lot of human suffering. I've visited many refugee camps in this world, and everywhere I went, people were dreaming of the mythical passage to America. Now, either these people are abysmally stupid, which I don't think, or maybe, just maybe, they know better. They know better because they have family here, because they have seen how successful their families have been in America. And so they have friends, relatives in the US who made it and found better conditions for the pursuit of happiness than anywhere else. As it had done for many, many generations by now, the United States, shortcomings notwithstanding, still offers the best opportunity for the wretched of this earth to build a better future. For the wretched of this earth, yes, of course, but not only for them. Which brings me to the second, almost unique quality that makes the US truly exceptional. The United States of America remains the most powerful magnet for the best brains on our planet. I've been jetting around the US since the end of COVID and travel restrictions, and what I have found has been nothing short of heartwarming. Whilst the narrative that reverberates out of Washington, D.C. seems to be stuck in a morose end of an era mood, the real country has shown an incredible resilience and an untamed creativity. New clusters of high-tech industries, top universities and research institutes are popping up in places no one would have bet on 20 years ago. The production of clean energy increases every year. Strategic factories that had been imprudently delocalized are being brought back. Engineers, creators, artists, and scientists from all over the world keep feeding America's insatiable thirst for talent. Your education system, for all its impressive size and quality, would not be able to feed such a machine and to produce the skilled workforce that you need to keep it alive. So this is still the biggest vacuum cleaner for talent in the history of humankind. And this is amazing. And it's the second point that makes America really exceptional, though we, the Swiss, are catching on. Frankly, we're catching up. We have learned from you. So this business model, this American business model, has been functioning perfectly for more than 200 years, and it remains a success story. A large proportion of students, postgraduates, and postdocs coming to study in America's most prestigious universities never leave. They stay here, they integrate into society, they integrate into the economic, political, and cultural ecosystem. They add tremendous value and cross-pollinate what is already one of the most impressive scientific ecosystems in history. As President Reagan put it, and I wish I could impersonate the Gipper, the US leads the world because, unique amongst nations, we draw our people, our strength, from every corner of the planet. Thanks to each wave of new arrivals, we are a nation forever young, forever bursting with energy and new ideas. So said the Gipper, and I might have added, a nation usually bursting with optimism, a society holding to the very deep-seated belief that every obstacle thrown your way is just there to be overcome. America is an idea. America is, or better said, it's an ideal. America is the city on the hill that everyone aspires to reach and never will, of course, because it's an ideal. And America is not a perfect country, mind you. There is no perfect country on earth, not even Switzerland. But this persistent striving for something unreachable is what makes your country truly unique. It also explains your constant soul searching and your recurrent discussions about American decline. For a variety of reasons, right now, this discourse of American decline seems once again to be the dominant one. America seems to have lost some of its optimism and its legendary self-confidence. And one of the key ingredients of American success has lost some of its magic. And this is precisely what I would like to speak to you about today. And I would like to reflect with you on the power of the narrative. This nation of yours is crazy about sports, mostly sports that no one else plays, so that you can be world champion without any competition. But we won't dwell on that. Okay, but you hold the great coaches in almost cultish reverence. You have developed elaborated methods and rituals to bolster the self-confidence of your teams entering a competition, which means that as a country, you should understand that a powerful narrative is much more than just a nice storytelling. So what are the reasons? for America to have seemingly lost faith in itself and in its future? Well, in Switzerland, you know, we have 5 political parties. Yeah, 5 main political parties, many more. Right? Here in the US, you have only 2, which would lead to the assumption that more can be done with 2 parties than with 5. I beg to differ. Unfortunately, from the international perspective, it looks as if both extremes of the traditional parties, of the traditional political divide, are really busy undermining this nation's belief in itself as a whole. And I said, and I stress, both extremes. And this is not just because I'm Swiss and thus supposed to be neutral, but I hear the loudest voices, both in the conservative and then in the liberal camps, that have adopted a discourse that is increasingly motivated by fear, prejudice, and hatred. And they have seemingly lost the collective vision of what the United States of America is about. So let me offer the interpretation of the narrative that the world sees, presented through the lens of an international observer. Here we are. On one side, there is the conservative doom and gloom. America is not anymore the country of my youth. The very basic tenets of America, the American way of life, are being undermined by conspiracies, led all too often by evil foreign forces. There is a clear strategy to transform America through mass immigration, critical race theory, LGBTQ rights, wokeism, and other Marxism-inspired ideologies are trying to destroy the United States as we know it. And even worse, the very institutions in charge of defending American democracy are all part and parcel to the conspiracy. On the other side, the progressive pounding on what this country is supposed to have become is not great either, frankly. Every white male citizen should spend their days beating their chests in contrition for all the real and supposed crimes committed by their ancestors. Fundamental rights are being rolled back by a dwindling group of white supremacists, terrified of losing their privileges. This society is growing more and more unfair, more oppressive by the day. This country is moving toward fascism and civil war. This is what we hear every day on both sides. What these two narratives have in common is hatred. Hatred and a total rejection of the other half of American society, as well as a good dose of self-pity on one side and self-loathing on the other. The over-dramatization of political differences is, of course, being amplified by the perverse algorithms of the social media. And we have come to the frightening point where Americans of all potential political visions deny the other side the right to have a different opinion. And this radicalization of the political discourse also plays into a very old strain of typical American Puritanism. You like to, flog yourself. That is, I mean, this country was created by Puritans after all, and so you know what the Puritans are about. It's not good enough to have ideological or religious beliefs. One wants everybody else to share their vision or be damned. And so let's not fool ourselves. This country has been here before. We could just think of Joe McCarthy or the know-nothings in the 19th century. But these radical views have taken hold of the political discourse for quite a few years. And as if it were not already bad enough, totalitarian systems have grown more emboldened to sell their own fairly successful counter-narrative. Authoritarian countries have managed to portray themselves and their governing principles as a viable alternative to the American, or more broadly, to the Western value-based system. The calls for a multipolar world and for the end, of course, of US hegemony are being propagated, often in good faith, by people with grievances against the United States. And they are a perfect breeding ground for a pervasive and far more sinister discourse. Democracy has shown its limits. It's not able to solve the problems of the 21st century. Liberal democracies are weak and overwhelmed by the complexity of the modern world, whilst authoritarian systems and regimes are much better at planning ahead and at executing their decisions. Law and order reign in Russia. Yeah, well, they do. Strong regimes know how to deal with uncontrolled immigration. The traditional religious and societal values are not being undermined in authoritarian societies. Mind you, not only in America not only parts of American society do show a fascination for this authoritarian model. All over Europe, including Switzerland, this narrative is also gaining ground. So we really need to be aware of what's happening now, because this is the wrong. Oops. So sorry about that. Yeah, here it is. So now regarding the fact that this narrative is gaining ground, and we believe in the superiority, or people believe in the superiority of the authoritarian systems. Who won the battle against COVID? Where were all the successful vaccines developed? Which scientific power did it? Who did actually recover the quickest from the economic disaster after? The authoritarian regimes? No, they didn't. Actually, we should be, in my opinion, a little bit more proud of democracy. But that's it. This is why I think we need a turnaround. Now is the time to reclaim the narrative. Democracies have to reclaim the narrative. It is time to win back the leadership for global image. When I was a kid, granted, quite a few years ago, everyone wanted to be American. Everyone wanted to climb into a rocket and to go to the moon. Everyone was fascinated by American culture. And I think we have to go back to this time and to self-confidence, because the United States remains the major beacon of hope for the free world in the 21st century. Now, returning to a renewed self-confidence starts with having a clear-eyed look at US history. The crisis this country is going through is not really something new. I would even argue that periodical feverish bouts and destructive self-doubts are written very deep in the American DNA. Because this nation is by design in a state of permanent redefinition. And because of that, violent clashes between different visions have happened since the formation of this great country, as perhaps the founding fathers envisioned. And it's bound to occur at regular times and irregular intervals in American history. Let me take you a few examples to show how the last few years have been less exceptional than one might think. If you think that the Hill is polarized, try and remember the fistfights and the beatings around the Kansas-Nebraska Act just before the Civil War. If you speak stolen election, well, there was one. That's 1876. They ended up calling the president rather fraud haze, or you fraudulency, because the election was in fact stolen. There was a time when the country went on for 2 years with an incapacitated president. If you are worried by the weaponization of the justice apparatus, think about the difficult relationship between FDR and the Supreme Court at the beginning of the New Deal. So think about the ideological terror this country went through at the time of Joe McCarthy. And if you look at the late 60s and 70s, you can see a decade of painful, sometimes very violent soul searching, which makes today's self-doubts look like a walk in the park. So I could go on forever, but you get my drift. Nothing really new under DC's sun. So let me quote a very perceptive American describing the political tensions we are witnessing. I quote, "One party reads the newspapers and pamphlets of its own church and interdicts all writings of the opposite complexion. The other party condemns all such as heresy and will not suffer to read or suffer to be read, as far as its influence extends, anything but its own libels. The avenue to the public ear is shut." Very much to the point, isn't it? That's our situation now with the liberal media, the mainstream, the non-mainstream media, whatever. Who do you think said that? Well, which think tank, which political commentator? The thing is, this is a quote from President John Adams, talking about polarization in America in the year of the Lord 1815. So that was 2 centuries ago. So here you are once again in a nation plagued by doubts, where ideology has pitted one half of the population against the other, the coasts against the heartlands, the religious right against the godless left, which makes everyone pessimistic about the future, if for different reasons. Well, it is a recurrent state of affairs in American history, but it shouldn't become the new normalcy, because this country is so much better than that. Let me tell you why the American narrative is still worth defending. To my conservative friends, you're right, the United States is changing, like it always has. You might be fretting about the great replacement and about who is behind the constant flux of new immigrants that are transforming this country into something different. You should maybe have a deeper look at your own history, and you will find out who were the plotters. They were called the Founding Fathers. Because the Founding Fathers designed this country and this nation to be in a constant state of renewal. And as President Reagan said, if you ever closed the door to new Americans, US leadership would soon be lost. Of course, every new wave of immigration did and will set off a Pavlovian reaction of fear and rejection. It's normal, it's part of it, it's part of immigration. And just try and remember the Irish, the Scandinavians, the Russians, the Jews, the Italians, the Chinese, the Mexicans, you name it. And every time it was the same reaction, and every time America came out stronger than it was before. So they became Americans, and by the way, they died in their hundreds of thousands in the service of this country and to defend American values. So this is the secret recipe that made the US into the most successful nation in US history. To my progressive friends, you're right, this country is far from perfect, but have a fresh look at how much this nation has contributed and still contributes to making the world a better place. Consider how much the US has changed for the better instead of just gloomily focusing on everything that went wrong. Let me take you to some parts of the world where I have been, and I can show you how much worse injustice and violence can be. In case you didn't know, there are 7 billion people out there, and quite a lot of them would jump at the opportunity to become an American. So there must be a reason for that. And this is really, really, really an important message. What I have witnessed out there, including the Rwanda Genocide, and I could speak about quite a few other things, make me understand how much sometimes Americans are extremely provincial. They are so focusing on their own history that they forget to have a certain relativism and looking at how bad it can be out there. Instead, I encourage Americans to look forward to the positive elements you collectively achieved, which often get lost. I spoke about COVID-19. I could speak about the fact that American institutions proved once again unshakable in the face of the unprecedented, if somewhat clownish, assault on democracy on January 6th. Over the past decades, an increase in diversity throughout the political system has been realized in all 3 branches of government. After 27 years, one of the most ambitious science projects in human history came to a successful implementation with the launch and the deployment of the James Webb Telescope. But I think people struggle to realize what it means and what this achievement was. And perhaps more importantly, your country once again stood up to confront totalitarianism and aggression, giving us renewed hope in the ability of democracies to prevail. NATO is back and is not brain dead, and that's mainly due to American intervention. If it were not for America, Vladimir Putin would be in Kiev now, and the world would be a very different one. Thank you. Thank you, because you did it. So right now, the US is a house divided. It has become more and more difficult to be a moderate because the voices of reason are being drowned by negativity. The first 2 decades of this century are now behind us, and dark, very dark clouds are piling up on the horizon. Totalitarian regimes are once again raising their ugly heads. Climate change threatens to turn parts of our planet to waste. The pandemic has played havoc with our economies and our lifestyle, and war is back. If you found the 20th century funny, you're going to love the 21st. And this is why, as a friend, I plead with you to help America be the country of your dreams and of our hopes, not an America torn apart by ideology. Please help this country once again. Set the example in tone, tenor, and action for how people from different religions, races, and creeds can come together and find common ground for the common good. Not insisting on a zero-sum victory or a very zero-sum loss, but the ability to compromise and make deals that benefit the greater good, not only for the nation, but for the world. Be a little bit more Swiss, by the way, because we are always about compromise. The free world needs a strong America more than ever. And it's an America that believes in itself and projects positivity to the rest of the planet. It can be done. It has to be done, because the alternative is much too scary to consider. Thank you very much. Oh, here we are. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please stay here. That was awesome. Thank you very much for speaking to us today. We have a tradition here at our club where we, first of all, we would like to present you with your very own tree.
Oh, my.
And
thank you so much.
And this is, we have decided, our club has made you an honorary member.
Well, thank you so much.
So,
I feel very humbled. Thank you.
Thank you very much
Thank you
for
so much.
speaking today.